Now let's talk about net present value. And as you can see, net present value, given that you've probably used the Excel NPV function for calculating present values, is basically going to be using the present value techniques that you're already familiar with. So just quickly launch into this. What is net present value? It's the present value of all future cash flows. In other words, you're predicting those future cash flows or anticipating them and discounting them at your threshold rate of return. The rate of return that you need to satisfy for this to be better than some alternative project, which gives you that rate of return, or to be better than the cost of the funds that you're getting. Because ultimately, you need to get funds in order to make the investment. So the computation is actually pretty straightforward. Work out what your rate of return, your required rate of return is, or rate of interest, and work out the cash flows and calculate their present value. And this should be no surprise to anybody. The formulas, whether you remember them or not, work basically like that. The net present value is basically the initial cash flow, which is usually going to be negative, right, is an outflow, and all the positive cash flows that will happen later on. Although they need not be positive. If they happen to be identical, they're annuities, but you might have positive cash flows for a bunch of years, and then you need to reinvest 5 or 6 years down the track to redo your product or to refurbish your machine, or what have you. Okay, so that's basically how the calculation happens. We've seen that before. So an example. Let's assume you've got a discount rate of 10%. You've got these cash flows. Ooh, have we seen this before anywhere? Hey, this is the old payback one from before. Okay, net present value. Let's say we've got a 10% discount rate. Do we take the project, discounting at 10%? I'm not going to tell you work through all the discounting because you've done enough of this before. We discount, so the first period 1.1, divide 5,600 divided by 1 plus 10%. The second period divide 5,600 by 1 plus 10% twice, etc. Net present value is 3,228. The criterion is always straightforward. Once you've incorporated your threshold rate of 10%, you basically take the investment if its net present value is greater than or equal to 0. Hopefully greater. It'd be ironic that the calculations are so precise it's exactly equal to 0. So do you take it? Yeah, you take that project. Okay, so net present value is basically the increase in shareholders' wealth. Are we ahead of our cost of capital, if that's what your threshold rate is? If it's a 0 net present value, what does that mean? You're generating enough cash flow to repay your source of funds, return the original investment. So, an example. Katana Industries Limited is looking at investing in a new piece of equipment for its factory. Oh no. For its factory. Costs are projected to reduce by $140,000 in year 1, $80,000 in year 2, etc., etc. Now, costs are projected to reduce. The reason we're investing in this factory is to give us some sort of return. And the return here is making our factory more efficient by reducing costs. So these really are payoffs, right? They're cash inflows or reductions in cash outflows. Same thing. It cost $240,000 to make the investment, and we wanted 11% rate of return. Okay, your standard net present value calculation. And yes, present value, net present value is positive. So go for it.